Sorry, I've been real tense from all the ghost sightings in the area. Luckily, I just built this Proton pack from scratch. Actually, I'd like to use this video to explain to you exactly how I did it. But first, I have to give a shout out to Eric from Eric Builds the Movies for his video on the subject. It was a great resource in building this pack and goes a lot more in depth with the techniques you need to use to build something like this. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. First, a look at the main tools you are going to need. A power drill, a Dremel tool with this extension attachment, and the following bits: sander, wood cutter, detail cutter, metal cutter, wood saw, and metal saw. Also need a heat gun, which we can use to shape this versatile material called Sintra, and the slightly less versatile but more durable acrylic, which you can see I used for the frame of the pack. Be careful when sawing and drilling holes in this, as it can shatter. At the bottom I used a heat gun to make the curve. The whole thing was then sanded and painted in silver. I cannibalized these straps from a cheap backpack and used acrylic paint on the front to get the right color. You can see the LEDs I glued beneath the cyclotron are shining through here, and at the bottom where I finished attaching the straps. I then moved on to the Cryo Box, which is mostly constructed of Sintra. Looking in this window, I cut ping pong balls in half, glued them to a Sintra plate, and painted it in copper. Over that, using glue, I attached this craft mesh. Now I'd like to give you a brief overview about how I made these box shapes. Wanting to keep it sturdy as possible, I cut out patterns I would then be able to heat and fold into the appropriate shape. Applying Bondo to the open edges, I then sanded it to make the corners look contiguous, after which sanding and painting. This simple hinge was created with 2 screws so the door, which is also made of heat-shaped Sintra, opens easily. On the side here you can see I added some pop rivets, which were painted black and then sanded to give it that worn look. I then cut a hole in the front of the door, shaping a hollow portion to use this handle, which I cannibalized from a cheap toolbox. Drilling 2 holes and inserting screws through the sides of the hollow created this rudimentary hinge for it. This bar was made out of PVC. I filled the ends in with Bondo to accept the hinge screws, then painted it in black. For the yellow pattern, I cut numerous thin strips of painter's tape, which I placed in these rows, as well as 2 long pieces across the top and bottom. Then I painted yellow over that and removed the tape to reveal the pattern. Inside the box, you can see the voltmeters are powered by 4 9-volt batteries. The cyclotron LEDs were wheel brights bike lights, which has a switch on the battery pack here. You can see the Sintra plates of the facade at the sides. I also formed a Sintra pocket to hold the batteries, using superglue to attach it to the back. This piece of silver painted Sintra is attached to a small cube of wood painted black and attached to the frame. The rest of this is attached to that, including this Sintra box shape. 2 pieces of this wood were used for this portion, and on top was glued a Sintra square. This LED is a voltmeter bought off Amazon. This copper painted portion is actually PVC tubes glued into these metal plumbing corner pieces. Here I used sanded Bondo to make the pipes look welded to each other. These connector pieces were cut out of steel, painted, then attached to the grill and the back of the pipe using small screws. Over from this angle, we have a strange piece found at a junk store. I hot glued a bunch of wires to it, then used a steel angle piece to attach it to the box below. Next to that is a small project box I painted silver. The front plate unscrews and you can screw it down from inside. This dial I got at a junk store and used another metal angle piece to fix it down. Over here I used another project box, cut in half, nailed to a little block of wood in the back to screw on the frame, but not before attaching these little dials. I cut the buttons from wood sheet, then painted them blue and red before gluing them on. The frame of the Faraday cage was made from macrame rings. There were 5 altogether. This little one, 2 medium-sized ones, a large one at the back, and another large one cut into small pieces. All of this was connected with hot glue and wrapped in craft mesh. I attached to this metal sheeting in a 1-inch strip around the base, and up here is an angled piece of Sintra. The main cyclotron was a speaker frame, bolted to the board. On top of that, I formed this copper wire into 3 loops and hot glued them on these 3 places. On top of that, glued some random circuit boards here, 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 and here. On top of that, I attached some crisscrossing wires with hot glue. I am most proud of this grill, which I carved entirely out of wood, first using a jigsaw to cut the first circle and cut a hole in the middle of that. All the movie measurements for this are on the web. Then to make this beveled edge, I used the Dremel sander. Took a lot of time, but turned out looking just right. For the inside, I used a thinner wood you can cut with an X-Acto knife. These are dowels cut into 8 pieces, sanded, and painted a silver against the black of the rest of the grill. After wood gluing it together, of course. I cut this V-hook from steel sheet and bent the edges. Attached that to a straightened angle piece, which was itself attached to another small cube of wood painted silver. On top is another angle piece, and the hose is attached to a plumbing tube I drilled and glued into the wood block. After that, I covered it in some heat shrink tubing. Another angle piece here holds up this plumbing implement I found at the hardware store. This piece on top was a PVC implement painted silver and glued down, and the bottom hose was for a toilet. It screws right on, then the other end is glued down to the Cryo Box. Over here we have 4 distinct Sintra boxes which have been screwed together. You can see behind here a small modified project box supplements this portion. Here is a smaller, yellower voltmeter, and this decal design I found on the internet and printed on sticker paper. To this box I've attached these 2 knobs that do turn. It attaches to the frame there. Third tier was half project box bonded onto shaped Sintra, and this PVC fixture goes right through to the back. I made it so you can pop this last box off. See the circuitry in PVC? And it slides right back in. Also wanted to show you this other side so you can see the 4-tiered structure. The bottom 2 are bolted to the frame, and this second copper assembly finishes it off. Now for the Neutrino Wand! All these tubes are various sizes of PVC glued and screwed together. This is foam insulation with some of the guts pulled out to make it thinner and then glued on. I made sure to glue these switches into holes I drilled into the box in a way that they would still move and click. This knob's attached to a threaded bolt. I hollowed out a cavity in this side of the box with Dremel cutting and sanding bits, then screwed in this PVC handle assembly. The cone's a Mega Block piece. In that I put some more copper coil. Here you can see I added details cut out of that thin wood sheet. The male V-hook's cut out of steel and shaped with a pliers and hammer. From this angle, you can see more of the details. Glued on a small disc of wood here, and Dremeled this other detail. All of this is cut out with a Dremel. This is just a pen cap I glued some wires in. They go through here. You can see how I formed this insulation. This door is attached by 2 cabinet latches, and inside we can see the main box is made of wood, which I hollowed out with a drill. You can pull the second wheel brights out, which lights the barrel. The block is just 3 pieces of this wood glued together. It all fits in there nicely, and the door stays on tight. Here I did some more detail carving on the side. These 2 tubes are more of that copper wire which I shaped and hammered into holes I drilled in these bolt-shaped details. The heatsink on the front of the gun is actually 7 pieces of this wood, 4 larger and 3 smaller, glued together. Down here we got another PVC piece glued on, and on the side of this is a cube of wood I sanded into this shape and glued to the heatsink. The barrel is 3 different sizes of PVC glued into one another. The medium size I drilled and sawed some slats into. In the main barrel I drilled a number of holes. You can see more of that insulation glued to it. Then up here at the other end, you can see after I screwed this hose into the PVC, I used some more heat shrink tubing to seal it. Then I attached 2 lengths of wire using some zip ties all the way up the hose. Gun in the holster, and you're set to go. Well, there you have it. All in all, this project took about 150 some hours of labor to complete and cost between $250 and $300 in materials. But as you can see from the result, it was well worth it. Well, thanks for watching, and good luck with your own packs. And as always, happy hunting.